All right, thanks for that, Joey. Well, time now for a check of your top stories, and we start with the latest on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And the situation in Ukraine is becoming much worse. Over the weekend, fighting intensified, Russian forces moving closer to the city of Kiev, killing an American journalist as they advance. Russia is launching a deadly attack to the far west, less than 20 miles from where Jay Gray is, as he continues to cover the war and the growing humanitarian crisis along the Poland-Ukraine border.
Russia stepping up its attack over the weekend, tanks shelling this apartment complex in the port city of Mariupol. Missiles ripping apart this military base less than 15 miles from the Polish border, killing 35, wounding more than 100 as the Kremlin looks to block the flow of weapons from the west. Russian troops also closing in on Kyiv. Award-winning journalist Brent Renaud killed during heavy fighting in the suburb of Irpin. A colleague who was injured says they were shot by Russian soldiers despite identifying themselves as press.
We crossed a checkpoint and they start shooting at us. So the driver turned around and they kept shooting.
That violence pushing more families from their homes, more than 2.5 million escaping, most traveling to Poland. Mayors in the country's two largest cities, Warsaw and Krakow, now warning they're running out of space and saying more arrivals could affect, quote, the functioning of the cities. Adding to the struggle of so many who now must find a place to stay, even further from the place they call home.
In the meantime, possible COVID outbreaks are being reported among educational institutes across Puerto Rico, and officials say they're mostly among kids ages 0 to 9 years old. Our Francis Felix reports.
Although positivity, hospitalizations, and deaths from COVID-19 have decreased in recent weeks, at the same time an increase in the incidence of cases among minors is observed, particularly in mountain municipalities and the west part of the island. This was alerted through Twitter by the professor of biostatistics at Harvard University, Rafael Irizarry, when mentioning the particular data for the last week in towns such as Utuado, Adjuntas, and Hormigueros. In fact, according to the updated data dashboard published daily by the university professor, there has been an increase during the last week in the positivity of cases in the groups of 0 to 9 years old, 10 to 14 years old, and 15 to 19 years old. This compared to what was reported on March 1. Regarding the data by municipality, the dashboard indicates that the towns of Utuado and Hormigueros had a positivity of 21% and 17% respectively as of March 13. The report on the situation of the COVID-19 epidemic in Puerto Rico, which includes an analysis from February 27 to March 5, coincides with Irizarry observations, noting that the age group with the highest positivity was 0 to 4 years old with 7%, followed by 5 to 9 years old with 5%. Precisely, this is the group that is not able to be vaccinated. In Puerto Rico, this population is estimated to be more than 117,000 boys and girls. As dictated by the protocols of the Department of Health, students in public and private schools and university institutions must continue to use masks in classrooms. In addition, it is recommended to reinforce hand washing and disinfectation on campus. Reporting from San Juan, Puerto Rico, Francis Felix.
All right, thanks so much, Francis. Well, this is all going on in Puerto Rico. Well, another booster for COVID-19 may be required. That's according to Pfizer's CEO. According to the CDC, some moderately or severely immunocompromised people who have had 3 doses of the Pfizer or Moderna COVID-19 vaccine can already get a 4th dose of the vaccine. Now, that's according to the CDC, but it's not clear if or when the U.S. Food and Drug Administration might authorize a 4th dose of the COVID vaccine for healthy teens and adults. Currently, anyone ages 12 and older who got a 2nd dose of the Pfizer vaccine at least 5 months ago can get a 3rd dose. The CDC says anyone ages 18 and older who received the 2-dose Moderna vaccine should get a booster shot 6 months after their 2nd dose. Now, the CDC also says anyone who got the single-dose J&J vaccine should get a booster shot after 2 months. And switching gears now, as authorities are asking for your help to find a man they say is targeting the homeless population in New York City and in Washington, D.C. Now, we should warn you, this video you're about to see is rather disturbing. The video is from one of the shootings in New York City on Saturday. You can see here the suspect is seen standing over one of his victims, nudging the man with his foot before shooting him. Police believe the suspect shot 5 homeless men over a 9-day period, killing 2 of them. Now, most of the victims were sleeping. The New York Police Department and Washington Metropolitan Police are working together on this investigation. They say similar circumstances and characteristics is what is helping them in this case. And the impacts of climate change can be dramatic and far-reaching, but they can also be subtle and noticeable only under the illumination of scientific research. Now, that may be the case in a recent discovery by researchers from Stanford University. Spencer Christian brings us this next report.
If you come across a California market squid, it may be on your dinner plate. But when researchers from Stanford came across the sea creatures, it was someplace more unusual. Waters in the Gulf of Alaska, many hundreds of miles north of their normal West Coast habitat.
Yeah, their typical range would be from basically Washington State down to Baja California, and yeah, they made a pretty big leap.
Marine researcher Benjamin Burford was working as a graduate student at Stanford when he began looking into the northern migration. He found the highly adaptable squid not only extended their habitat, but managed to keep growing to their full size at the same time.
They have the ability, instead of having to reach a specific size or age in order to mature and breed, they can adjust that based on the conditions they experience. And so often what you'll see is squid that grow up in really poor conditions, like warm, not a whole lot of food. They'll mature at really small body sizes.
But at full size, he says the Alaska squid have the ability to hunt small fish, potentially impacting populations of baby salmon and other sea life. In recent years, marine biologists have noted a number of other marine species, like juvenile great white sharks, also extending their range farther north, to waters near Monterey. Theories have centered on climate change and warming ocean temperatures, but Stanford marine scientist Professor Mark Denny says the forces could be even more complex.
Can't just look at, oh, well, the water temperature went up, so they moved. Well, you've got to have, the competition with other things and the lowering oxygen levels and things like that to explain it.
They say it's all critical to understanding which species might be on the move in coming decades, along with where they might wind up. And just as important is the impact they could have on everything from fishing to local ecosystems once they establish themselves.
I mean, that's the first thing we want to know. What are these squid doing? Who are they eating? Who's eating them? Who are they competing with? Because it's a new ecosystem. It's gonna affect them.
Interesting.